Without any further ado, let's just kind of get started. So again, big goal. We're interested in graduate student perspective to inform our steps in terms of gathering information for graduate student recruitment. So let's just kind of get started. And I'll just kind of go down this list and pipe in as you have as you're interested. Um, so first question is, how were you and your fellow students drawn to the measurement field?
Do we just pipe in whenever?
Yeah, pipe in whenever.
Um, I can't speak for anyone else, but I got drawn into the measurement field largely by accident. One of my psychology professors went on kind of an interested rant on how cool it was that we could measure certain things and how we could measure things like reliability and consistency for a scale. And she went on and on for a few minutes and then had to stop, take herself off her soapbox and say, I'm sorry, I'm just such a psychometrics nerd. And I went up to her after class and asked what that word meant and then decided to go get a degree in that. But I think that largely I had never heard of the field before that moment. And there weren't any classes that I could take as an undergraduate other than taking like applied statistics classes, um, and then just using my own information to connect that back to psychology. So that's how I got into the field.
Victoria, thanks for giving us that insight. Do you remember what class you were taking when that happened? What the topic was?
Yeah, so I think that was it's I think that was an industrial psychology class. So looking at things like personality assessments, and that was sort of the lead in. But the professor actually um, had taken a lot of quantitative classes um, at her graduate university, and that's how she was interested in kind of that part of the field.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can I share mine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my case, I've been pursuing the teacher's certificate when I was an undergraduate. And in my home country, the educational statistics or educational evaluation was kind of required courses to get the teacher's certificate. So a lot of students from the education department has to be taking that classes. And so one of our professors in the educational evaluation was really good at advertising his specialties, his expertise, and he kind of like intrigued a lot of interesting questions related to the evaluation and measurement, and always ended up the sentences like, if you really want to know more, please apply the graduate the program and so on. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I got drawn to this program.
Great. Others?
Hi, everyone. I can share my perspectives.
Yeah,
My
great.
name is Tao. I am a PhD candidate here at Washington State University. Dr. French is actually my mentor, so hi, Brian. So I'll just speak from my perspectives, which is a little bit biased, but I'll share it anyways. So I started in psychology, which is so broad. You can do so much with it. I think all of us, human development, psychology, some sort of social science area. And I really was interested in measurement because it was so pervasive in any area I was trying to understand human behavior. You are required to measure a bit by some means. And so um, in some ways, I did accidentally run across Brian's program, or the program here at WCU and Brian's lab, which I got exposed to. But one of my main ways that I am so drawn to measurement is because, in education specifically, is because of all the potential good and meaningful change you can do with it, right? I would say, and go on a limb to say that not everyone is drawn to educational measurement because of the statistics side of it, right? Education doesn't pay a lot. Like the reason why we're all drawn to education, I think, is because we want to make a difference in the landscape of society, how scores are used to make decisions for students, for children, etc. And so I think that, and I'm going to go on a limb by saying that some of the barriers right now I'm seeing from NCME's recruitment and retainment side of things is that we as a field haven't really spoken to what our field can do for education. And another reason why I see it's such a barrier is because if we really wanted to go into machine learning or some statistics side of using modeling and SEM and all that stuff, there are other programs that do that. But I think that the equity side of things, or the chance to make a change in education, whether that's policies and guidance for policymakers to enact these changes, is coming from us. The power that data has to inform meaningful changes in society and education. And I think that right now is kind of what I feel is missing from NCME's messaging when they talk about recruitment, because we know that our field, I mean, I'm speaking, I think, introspectively to statistics, hasn't done a very good job supporting equity, as we know, in terms of using large-scale assessments to make decisions about students, and how standardized tests recently have garnered such negative tones from the public, and this distrust that we have. And so how are we going to use measurement and specific educational measurement to make meaningful changes in society and education? So going off of my soapbox a little bit, like that's kind of what I'm drawn to the field. And I know that there are, small groups of educators and emerging scholars that can speak to this sort of like this ethical and moral draw towards educational measurement. And then I think that if we were to be very intentional about recruitment for generations to come, we could think about that and leverage that as one of the reasons why, we can get more people interested in making meaningful work happen. So anyways, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing is putting the education back into educational measurement. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I think that's one of those conversations writ large throughout methodological fields, that is something that we have to kind of contend with, is somewhat getting back to basically the scholarly field that we started in. So yeah, I would agree with that. Anybody else? How are you drawn to the measurement field?
I can probably share like my story, like my perspective here, as well as my peers. So I before joining like my current PhD program at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I was pursuing like a master degree in like educational policy side, and there was one time that I personally conducted like a primary data collection regarding one specific like a personal design survey. And during my presentation at the American Psychology Association annual meeting, one of the attendees there mentioned about the program about measurement thing. And that's the very first time that I heard about like, educational measurement as a international student. Because before that, before before that, I was like trained in the field of mathematics and stats. So I have never heard of like educational measurement thing at all. But I do know like some of my cohorts here in the program, they are actually drawn to measurement field because they have their personal interest regarding evaluation or assessment things themselves. Most of them are from the field of psychology. So I'll say probably, there might be a potential appealing side of our program for students from psychology side. Yeah. I would
Yeah.
say the major, oh, go ahead.
You can continue.
I feel like regarding the major barriers that I encountered here is kind of like, first thing is, for me as international student, before coming to the States for the graduate degree, not too many scholars in my home country are from this field. So, and also advertising or like marketing, in our country regarding this program is limited, I would say. And after entering this field as a PhD student, I'll say that as I would say like most of my, I don't know, not sure about the other programs, but for me, I encountered a lot of like application studies when I were pursuing the degree. But I feel like I want to be more professional trained in the theoretic side, like the methodology side. And that brought me to the other side about the barriers about how to remain in this field after graduation. I consulted some senior PhD students what's their plan after graduation. Some of them like mentioned about they will be like a psychometrician, or some of them like will be like data scientist here. I don't know. I thought like what can we do after graduation? The opportunities after graduation maybe also a little limited, or like waiting for us to explore later. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So getting into thinking about barriers, are there other barriers that any of you can think of to entering into the field or to remaining in the field after graduation?
I can add for entering into the field. A little bit of background. I also came from psychology, but I was drawn to measurement not for the education perspective, but for the utility and flexibility of what you can do with measurement. Because as was mentioned in the social sciences, all of the social sciences measure things. They need measurement professionals.
Yes.
But my major barrier to transitioning from undergrad in psychology to grad school in measurement was I didn't know what I was looking for in a program, and it seemed like there weren't that many programs. I didn't know where to find them or what to look for in order to find them. And so I think just that lack of familiarity with the field, which I recognize is the point of this, was a barrier in and of itself because I didn't know how to use the words to express what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like a two-step sort of thing. Like one, you didn't know really what this was, and then once you found out about it, you didn't know how to find the programs that were in it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I knew it wasn't really quantitative psych that I wanted to do. I knew it wasn't really statistics. Like I didn't want a degree in mathematics. And I knew what I wanted was somewhere in the middle. And it didn't occur to me for a long time that in the middle would be in education.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Megan, if I could ask a follow-up question too. I'm just curious in your experience going through that, what helped you make that decision, or how did you get the information to make that decision to go into it, to look at certain programs, or how do you connect with certain people to help in that process?
I did a lot of Googling. But the way that I really, I mean, learned the term, like the term psychometrician, was I got really lucky and I ended up working for a psychological test publisher. Um, and that's just sort of like that was like the key to me figuring out what I was looking for. Was I just happened to end up working there. But when it came to, because they're a psychological test publisher, most of the people I worked with had been school psychologists or quantitative psychologists. So they didn't really go through educational measurement, but having that experience helped me, when I was doing all of the Googling, understand what I was Googling for. That gave me the word psychometrician, so then I could Google programs for psychometricians.
That makes sense. So did you, just to kind of probe this a little bit, was it serendipitous that you ended up at a test company, or was it that you sought out a test company after graduation?
It was very serendipitous. I mean, it was like lightning struck, that sort of chance occurrence. So I was very lucky to have had that.
Got it. So now all we have to do is reproduce that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Send everybody out of psychology programs to work near test publishers and then just let them find it.
That makes total sense.
Yes, yes, that'll do it.
Perfect. Well, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to add to this conversation in terms of barriers getting into the field, barriers about remaining in the field?
So one of my, I don't know about barriers because I definitely didn't change my mind, but one of the things that I found really difficult on entering the field, particularly coming from a psychology background, and more of an industrial organizational psychology background with just like a couple of statistics classes, is that the initial level of knowledge needed for statistics was just so beyond what I had at that point. And then I went to take, the calc classes and the statistics classes, but they don't often connect back to psychology or education in the way that we have to think about it as psychometricians. And so I think having more just, hey, so you passed your high school algebra classes and now let's get you caught up to the point where you need to start graduate school, kind of connection for math and statistics, I think would be at least helpful in terms of getting people that might be a little concerned at the initial buy-in for the level of math needed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Does anybody else want to join in on that? Lizzie says she seconds that.
Oh yeah, but it's kind of like a different perspective. So
Sure.
I definitely feel like stats, especially like the foundation of stats, are really important in our management field, because like we have kind of like I would say like two kinds of measurements being conducted. One is kind of like the application side, right? And the other track is about like theoretic development regarding measurement. And I do realize that for some of sometimes when when I'm interested in doing some like theoretic digging, I realize that okay, it looks like my previous training in applied mathing was not that good enough. I need those kind of like background knowledge from stats side. And I do feel like after taking those kind of like stats course, I can see that myself, like improvement in understanding and developing ideas. But it's just like, I just wish that I knew those things like much earlier, maybe like since the initial involvement in this field. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So moving on, I'm hearing students say that they came from psychology fields, education fields. Did anybody come from a different field other than psychology and education? I'm hearing no, at least not here. Corinne or Brian, do you know anybody that came from another field?
I feel like I see more variability in our international students coming from places outside of psychology and whatnot, but at the same time, I think it's a pretty good fit with what people are saying here.
Yeah,
Oh,
that makes sense.
sociology. I see sociology there.
Oh, sociology. Okay.
I had someone come through oddly, but doing social research in the area of like land management, forestry, and so forth. But the work they were doing in that field was more social science related, but certainly a different background, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. There's definitely lots of people from other, I think, social science and social science related fields who are doing measurements or creating measures. That's for sure. Yes.
Well, and we
Okay.
see people from statistics backgrounds. I wonder.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My advisor was a statistician.
Yeah.
So
I wonder, before you move on to the next one, or
Yes.
even if people think about listing out some more fields in the chat, the second part of the barriers question, I know is a little hard for everybody on this call to answer, because, you know, most of you are still in graduate school, but I'm sure some of you have seen some of your peers graduate, and some of them stay in educational measurement fields, but some of them might go outside. Some of them might get their PhD in measurement, but then ultimately end up working in a field that's more broad or more general or just something different. Do you all have any thoughts about what kind of things would pull you to a job that you don't actually stay in measurement post-graduation? Or do you just plan on staying in measurement no matter what else tempts you?
I would be, I think, willing to transition into jobs that were more data science heavy rather than measurement, kind of take a sidestep into data science. And I think, I know nobody else has said anything, but I think that would be common because I found, at least among the students in my program, that connection between measurement and data science, it's very forward in our mind, that is an option and that there is potentially more money on a data science side than on the measurement side.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen plenty of actually I've had two PhD students who have gone to as data scientists. So that's definitely true.
Oh, that's interesting what Victoria wrote in the chat. It implies to me, so you say, I think the flexibility of the training is one of the appeals. So it implies to me that it's not just, oh, I found something else for more money, or that maybe initially it was that I could do a lot of things with this degree. And so, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
personally, it's just like a really nervous time to be looking for work at the moment. And it kind of has been for,
Mm.
you know, the whole time that I've been trying to plot out a career. And so, you know, I would love to work in measurement and in education. Those are my passions, those are my goals. But I'm not too proud to take a paycheck if, you know, something were to happen where there weren't enough jobs available in this field, or there are jobs available, but they don't meet my needs in other ways. And so I really do appreciate the flexibility of this kind of training, that I could go work in data science or, you know, anything that really uses human research like vocational studies or marketing. I would love to stay in education, but, you know, the bills got to get paid.
Fair enough. I mean, so then that, you know, that also like begs the question then, right? What what is it then about measurement as opposed to going directly into something like data science or statistics that really differentiates itself? I mean, I guess maybe that's the whole point, right? This flexibility is part of the differentiation, right? Whereas something like statistics or data science is a lot more one-tracked. Something like educational measurement is like data science and.
Exactly. And I think that the human element is also important, like thinking
Yeah.
of how to include the human element into different decisions.
That makes sense.
I also felt that educational measurement, just thinking of it, it felt more accessible than trying to go from psychology as an undergrad into a very mathematic heavy program. Educational measurement, it was still a social science. It was a statistically heavy social science, but it was a social science, so it was familiar.
That makes sense. So in that sense, you're getting into a data science field, but not getting into something that may seem completely inaccessible, like statistics.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. So moving on. So we have a question here about the organization NCME engaging students more. Are there any ideas about how NCME can engage students more? Right. So as we're thinking about getting more students into the field, and whatnot, obviously, I think the organization has to be a kind of the center for all of that, right? So is there any way that you can think of the organization engaging students more?
So I know that NCME has a graduate students issues committee, and I was like fortunate to be a part of that many years ago, and I know it's a continuing thing. I'm wondering if at a SIGME level or lower or smaller, are there chances for graduate students to become part of those decisions? Spaces where we can, contribute to the mission and action plans for the direction of these specific SIGs or SIGMEs. Because I think that would be valuable at a smaller, more localized level of NCME to create spaces and more inclusive spaces for graduate students like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've even had that conversation in our group about potentially having a student as one of the co-chairs as well. So I like that idea. Any other ideas, thoughts on this?
One thing, Justin, I'll throw out as people are
Yep.
thinking about this is I'd be curious, not just in the ways NCME could engage more, but I'd be curious to hear from students how they felt NCME has engaged them already, or if they don't feel that. That would be something interesting to see, like what
Yeah, that's true.
aware of the opportunities. I think Tal mentioned one through the Graduate Student Issues Committee, but are students aware of other opportunities, or have they seen those or tried, how do you take advantage of those? How do you get involved? Or how has NCME reached out to the students? Have you felt that already or experienced that? And it might be a no.
Yeah.
I think that's oh, go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
No, I'm so sorry I cut you off.
No, go for it.
I don't know if this is quite what you're looking for, but I find that I actually get a lot of emails related to NCME and AERA, and I sort of have a folder and I just dump them all in this folder because most of them don't apply directly to me. And I think in some ways the communications related to grad student specific stuff gets lumped into that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's great to hear, actually. I mean, not great that you don't feel like you're getting things, but it's great to hear like what's happening, like how is that information coming to you, and if it is a way that we see those emails, and I mean, I think I do this sometimes too, like, oh, that's NCME, I'm gonna put it over in this bucket for later, but there's not really a call that you're feeling to be engaged as a student in that material. That says, you know, to me, that says something that we need to think about for sure.
You all can reflect too, if you've ever attended the meeting, on, you know, when you're actually there with other people in the field, are there ways that NCME could help you to feel more comfortable to engage, or do you find that there's plenty of ways to engage at the annual meeting?
I would have to say if there would be any way to offer like any sort of funding to students that aren't presenting, because I know that you know, for AERA and NCME and generally through like departments or universities, students that are presenting are able to secure funding, and that's definitely, you know, wonderful. But I also think that it's important to attend when you aren't presenting, and that can be a lot more financially difficult because there's virtually no funding opportunities if you're not presenting.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point. One of the whole things, like when you're not presenting, to some extent, you can actually be more present, right? If you're not presenting, you aren't worried about your presentations, and you can actually maybe even more fully engage when you're there.
I noticed at the last NCME or the one before, because I know that there's always a graduate student lounge. And I think there's usually like a coffee or breakfast or something involved. But I noticed in one of the last meetings that it was kind of out of the way. It was like at the end of a hallway around several other rooms that had ongoing presentations. And so it wasn't like I ever walked past it and thought, oh, this is the graduate student. I should go sit in here and get a cup of coffee while I have some free time. So I think making those sorts of things at the actual conference more centralized. I mean, this might be a very silly example, but like a centrally located table with a large stack of cupcakes that says graduate students check in here would get my attention, and would be something that I would go and I would engage with other graduate students at a table full of cupcakes.
I totally agree. I think that sometimes, you know, students just aren't like aware of what's available or what's going on. Another thing that might help is kind of an example of like a mock schedule. Because when I went to my first conference last year and I was like, I'm going to go to like one every single block for the whole length of the conference that I'm there. And that was probably the most foolish way to approach going to a conference that I could have done, particularly for like networking opportunities and things. And so just sharing like how, you know, how do people that have been in the field and have gone to conferences lots and lots, how do they manage like a schedule? Do they, you know, how do you pick which types of, like how many sessions to go to versus how many times to just stay back and network, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It would be nice too if there were options or opportunities that allowed us to be near each other in the hotel. Because the people I do meet at NCME tend to be people I meet in the elevator. And so if there were like a block of rooms that were maybe discounted for grad students only, and you just knew that, you know, most of the people in these rooms were going to be grad students, you'd be walking in and out together, you'd be taking the elevator together. So there'd be more opportunities to interact among ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. I anecdotally speaking, I remember going to this is an NCME, it was the Psychometric Society meeting, and the Psychometric Society meeting usually meets in like smaller places, I think often. And they met at University of Nebraska many I don't remember exactly when that was, but several years back. And while I was a graduate student, and they had I think usually actually the Psychometric Society does this. They have like a more like graduate student centric place, right? And so they had a block of rooms just staying on the campus. It was in one of the dorms, and I ended up having a roommate. You have, you know, with some of these things, you have like a roommate. And so I had a roommate, and I ended up later interning with him at ACT when I did my internship. And so he's still a really good friend of mine, but that was a really great thing. Right. Anything else?
Hey, this is Haley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I was thinking from my past experience, maybe some like the graduate student social event, no matter in person or virtual, will be helpful for us like connect to graduate students from other programs, from other institutes. We don't need to be very kind of specific academic, talking about your research projects or dissertation. Can be just like social. Hey, this is Haley. I graduated from UF program. Currently, I'm assistant professor at Florida State University. I'm working on this. It's like just like the chat with friends and trying to kind of finding someone who shared the similar interest or at least experience some like the same things. Like I'm struggling with my OPT or I'm struggling with something. Do you have those kind of struggle or the same thing in your institutes? How did you solve these things in your institutes? I think this like information sharing and among the graduate students across the different institutions will also help.
Yeah. That definitely makes sense. Maybe the organization could even just like open that up. And I don't know if they already have something like that, but some kind of just forum for graduate students. You know, whether it's a like a listserv that, or some space. I think there's spaces on the website where you can have conversations, right? Yeah, so maybe something like that. I don't know. Cool. Anything else?
I just want to chime in and say that NCME and AURA Division D, the methods, research methods, quant area of AURA, they do have a joint sort of reception for graduate students, and they plan that every year. And I'm not sure, I haven't been last year, a couple of years, but that is like a socializing space for grad students to get together and just kind of socialize and network with one another. I just want to share that many years ago, when I was part of the GSIG that was planning this social event, I was told by leadership at NCME's half, at least, not ARA, that it was a waste of money to get a social space for graduate students to get together without having any sort of sponsored, you know, in like industry, people from industry kind of marketing towards graduate students for opportunities or some type of keynote speaker and stuff like that. So I think that is one of the reasons why I don't know, engagement in our field is so hard for graduate students, because we're constantly, I think, being told that there's not enough space for us to have our own thing to socialize within our networks and build relationships that can carry on, you know, in our careers, because there has to be something else for the field to like insert themselves, right? Like someone needs to be giving a keynote talk, someone needs to be advertising internship opportunities. And I think those are all really helpful. There's no doubt that those types of opportunities need to be spoken to, but I think having a space for ourselves, whether that's cupcakes or drinks at someplace, that is really critical for building our networks within ourselves. And so I just want to reiterate the importance of that networking within graduate students and building connections, because I've been in meetings before where we're told, like, why are we wasting money on drinks for grad students when they can go to the ETS reception later on or something like that. Like, that's not the purpose of the socialization. Socializing events, it's meant to create and give space for grad students to network amongst ourselves. And so I think that's crucial. I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you. All right, so moving on a little bit. So actually we could probably lump these two together. So we have here a question about increasing undergraduate involvement and also further ideas for recruiting into the field. So I just kind of want to open that up and see if there are any thoughts on these.
I think the measurement field as a field should reach out more to undergraduates in psychology, because with an undergraduate degree in psychology, you can do basically anything except really do psychology, because then you have to go to get a master's or a PhD in psychology. So there's a lot of students that are in the psychology program that are building these fundamental statistics skills and these fundamental assessment concepts just through exposure to psychology as a social science, that then will have their degree and not really necessarily plan to go any further because they don't want to go into psychology. And so then they will sidestep into some other industry, some other role. Whereas if we could catch some of them and say, hey, look, you have the experience, we'll take that experience and we can put you in this specific field where you're still related to social sciences, you're still related to psychology, but you don't ever have to see clients. I think that would be an opportunity, sort of an untapped market.
Great, thank you. Yep.
I would add the development of curriculum just written at a much lower level of like basic psychology and statistics knowledge. Perhaps eventually building up enough of a body of curriculum that universities could offer minors in psychometrics. I think that both in terms of getting people a little bit of knowledge while they're undergrads and also making them more interested in pursuing psychometrics as like a viable job field, it would probably need to start earlier, because I know that most universities that offer any kind of psychometrics program have classes at the 400 level that undergrads can take selectively with graduate students, but that's kind of late in an undergraduate career to be thinking about where you're going next. I think that needs to be offered at least a little earlier, like a 200 level class or something.
I would also add something about, like, in addition to the curriculum side, maybe there should be more details regarding graduate students, like future, like especially like post graduation. What are the potential opportunities for them? What are the target positions, especially like, in the field of management, that they may be able to apply to, like something like that clearly provided to students might be also a really good option.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other thoughts? So last question here is further ideas for recruiting undergraduate and other graduate students into the measurement field.
And Justin, I'll just add while people are thinking about that. I think part of our thinking here was we know, we've heard some of you have gone from undergrad straight into a graduate program or maybe a year of experience. We've also been talking about the idea that some students might not enter a graduate program until 5, 10, 15 years after being in the workforce in some other field. So we've tried to think about this recruitment phase both from the traditional did my 4 years, got my bachelor's, and then moving into a graduate program within a year versus the other one where I might be in the workforce for a few years and then moving back into a program. So I just want to make sure people are thinking a little bit about both of those paths.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, in fact, I think from those that are here that we heard examples of both, right? Coming directly from either an undergraduate program or a graduate program or from the workforce.
How about maybe if you try to imagine, maybe some of you all have some peers who are more in a data science area or statistic. What would be the draw to say to somebody, hey, maybe you'd actually like it over here. Like this is why we're great. Or maybe that's never happened.
I think that one of the appeals for me for educational measurement in psychological measurement, as opposed to working as an educational psychologist or working as a psychologist, was that I didn't really want to have like a one-on-one like working relationship with like a client or working at a school. I wanted to have kind of a wider reach. And also something that played a little bit more to my skills. I'm a little less of a talking to people person, and I'm definitely more of a let me think about this for a few minutes kind of person. And so I think that this caters a little more to that than more of a traditional psychology career. So.
Okay. Anything else? Parting thoughts? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share now. So I think we're just about at the end of time here. So I just wanted to thank everybody who is here for coming and sharing their thoughts. We are going to within the next week or two, we're planning to send out surveys to both graduate programs and also to graduate students. So do be on the lookout for a survey related to graduate students, and we'd be very, very interested to be able to, hear a little bit more about your thoughts on all of this in that. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.